This video is brought to you by Squarespace. More on that later. It's difficult not to have a romantic view of motorcycling history, especially with stories like the one we're looking at today. The shifting tides of dominance in every area of the motorcycle market, the pursuit of victory on the track, politics, personalities, accusations of cheating and copying. It all stems from arguably the funnest era to be a fan of all things two-wheeled. Despite all these changes, for decades, American flat track racing was really a closed kingdom ruled by a single machine, the Harley-Davidson XR750. Beating Harley on the dirt was viewed as virtually impossible. The XR was light, simple, and perfectly tuned for the unique demands of oval racing. Fast straights, sliding turns, and the delicate balance between brute force and control. This was Harley's game. They'd perfected it and slowly and consistently evolved every aspect of their machine to continue dominating. Rivals had tried to crack the formula, even Japanese rivals. Yamaha brought Kenny Roberts and the XS650 twin, and they'd won championships, but the Harley was thoroughly back on top as the 70s carried on. But there was one manufacturer left, a company known for winning at all costs once they set their eyes on something: Honda. Better known in the US for commuter bikes and also road racing machines, from the outside looking in, Honda had little reason to think that they could topple Harley on its home turf, but in the early 1980s, against the odds and against the culture of the sport itself, they did exactly that. What followed was one of the most audacious, controversial, and also short-lived chapters in American motorcycle racing history. Now, before we get too far into this story, I want to show you guys something that I've been working on. I've been wanting to build a website centered around the BART brand, so to speak, with 3 YouTube channels and also a book for sale. I would like to have everything all on one site, so I've been using Squarespace to build it. I've always been a huge fan of Squarespace. Back when I worked for an insurance agency, I built them a website, and I used Squarespace then. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform that helps you build and grow your online presence, whether you're starting something new or scaling your work. Squarespace gives you everything you need, and for me the biggest thing is that it makes it so easy to customize and build something really clean and nice without any experience. One of the coolest aspects is the design tools. I don't have to worry about coding. Squarespace templates just look clean, modern, and professional right out of the box. I was able to tweak it to match my style, and now it feels like my site really represents my brand. On top of that, I've been using their e-commerce tools to sell my book. The checkout system is smooth, payments are secure, and I can manage everything from the same dashboard that I use to update my channels and my content. And for the channels themselves, Squarespace's built-in SEO tools are awesome. It helps my content actually get discovered when people search for cars, motorcycles, or watches, so I'm not just relying on YouTube's algorithm anymore. So if you're thinking about launching your own project, whether it's a passion site, a store, a personal blog, whatever it is, head to squarespace.com/BART for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use my code BART to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and let's jump back into the story. Now, to understand Honda's gamble, you first have to understand what makes a dirt track bike different. This isn't just about building the most powerful machine. In fact, history has shown that too much power delivered in the wrong way can actually ruin a bike on the mile. Riders don't need maximum horsepower, they need usable horsepower, power that comes on smoothly and can hook up without breaking traction. A proper dirt tracker has to launch off the corner, keep the rear wheel spinning just enough to slide, but not so much that it washes out. That requires an engine with broad torque, delivered predictably. It sounds simple, but it really isn't. The XR750 was legendary for this. Its 2-valve pushrod twin didn't need to be exotic because it had almost a perfect spread of power for the old dirt oval. The chassis too had to be stable yet flickable, strong yet forgiving. Weight balance mattered just as much as outright speed, and then there's the simplicity factor. Flat track racing is brutal on machinery. Constant wheel spin, high RPMs, dust, heat. A bike has to be durable, easy to service in between heats, and rugged enough to take an absolute beating on a mile track without overheating or breaking down. Harley created arguably the greatest, winningest race bike of all time because they understood these elements. Unlike Honda's other racing projects, for all of their engineering sophistication, they were stepping into a world where complexity usually didn't help that much. Many suppose that Honda decided to take up the challenge of building a winning flat track bike for the simple reason of revenge. This story tells itself. Harley had used its influence in Washington, and when Honda's four-cylinder superbikes began flooding into the US market in the 60s and 70s, Harley pushed for legislation that would slow their rise. Tariffs, displacement limits, and import restrictions tilted the playing field in Harley's favor, keeping Honda's big bikes from freely dominating the American highway. For Honda, a company that prided itself on competing and winning in every area that it entered, the message was clear. Harley wanted them out of the picture, so when the opportunity came to challenge Harley at the very core of its identity, that is in American dirt track racing, Honda took it. Now, the truth is actually quite a bit less Hollywood. Honda was already well underway building up their dirt track program by the time that Harley leveraged the US government. We don't actually know why the heck Honda was interested in dirt track racing. They'd already proven that they could make competitive and successful dirt bikes. Regardless, Honda's first attempts at dirt track were, shall we say, a bit of an experiment. Much of that came down to Jerry Griffith, a California builder with a reputation for clever solutions. Griffith teamed up with Honda's US racing manager Dennis McKay in the late 1970s to see if something could be made of Honda's CX500 bike, the odd liquid-cooled shaft-drive V-twin, better known as kind of a quirky street bike. It was an interesting idea. The CX500, though quite cool, was proving to be a bit of a sales flop. The CX500 dirt track project was in many ways doomed from the start. The engine layout was awkward, taking the transverse V-twin and turning it sideways. The problem was that the power delivery wasn't right. Griffith cut, welded, and fabricated, trying every trick he knew. There was and is a long history of just taking bikes that already existed and turning them into dirt track racers and essentially hoping for the best. So this wasn't unprecedented. Riders like Hank Scott tried to wrestle this bike around the ovals, but it simply couldn't match the Harley. Still, these experiments weren't wasted. They taught Honda what dirt track racing demanded, and they showed that the company was serious enough at least to try. And so from this came the NS750, essentially a reworked and enlarged CX500. It was closer to the mark, more competitive geometry, and enough reliability to occasionally finish well. With Scott Pearson at the controls, the bike finally broke through at the 1982 Louisville Half Mile. Pearson grabbed the whole shot and never looked back, leading all 25 laps. Jerry Griffith credited the victory as much to Pearson's riding as to the machine, noting that the one-groove track that day really suited his aggressive style perfectly. Still, this proved that the Japanese giant could, at least on the right day, beat Harley. But this NS bike was still a compromise. Honda had learned from their own history of racing that compromise is never the way. If Honda wanted to win consistently, it needed a purpose-built flat tracker, one built from the ground up with one goal in mind: to beat the XR750. And so in the early 80s, rumors began to circulate of Honda's all-new flat-track race bike, and the word was that Honda was just going to get their hands on Harley's XR750 and make essentially a copy. This rumor would actually still persist till today, despite all of the evidence pointing the other way. This entire design for this new bike, including the engine, was unique, from the flywheel to the bearing setup to the frame. In Japan, Honda Racing Corporation, or HRC, set out designing an all-new machine, the RS750. What's fascinating about this whole project is that it was kind of a new type of development process, one that would call for Honda USA and Honda Japan to truly work together. Neither could accomplish this alone. This involved literally shipping various parts of the project back and forth from Tokyo to California. Now with this bike, as always, it started with the engine. This time it wouldn't be based on a modified street bike engine. Honda didn't have anything in their lineup that would suffice. This had to be a full-on, built-up race machine, notably air-cooled, 4 valves, overhead cam, and a V-twin, designed specifically for the dirt mile. The RS750 stood out in its design in quite a few ways. One area in particular would be important, and that is revving. Honda went with a 4-valve setup versus Harley's 2-valve, and this changed the way that the V-twin could rev. More revs for Honda in terms of 4-stroke development has always been about more power, and this engine allowed just that. By the end of its run, the RS750 was making close to 100 horsepower, even with restrictions, which is about the maximum amount of usable power, even still today in flat track. What's interesting about the RS750 though was its torque, which is so essential for dirt track racing. The RS750 was designed for broad, smooth torque with a power band that made the bike controllable through corners rather than just fast in a straight line, and crucially, the bike was built to withstand an absolute beating. Honda set out 3 clear objectives with this bike. First, the RS750 had to produce more power than Harley's XR. It managed roughly 5 extra horsepower at peak while still matching Harley in terms of low-end pull. Thanks to its 4-valve heads, the RS could also spin about 1,000 RPM higher. Second, the engine needed to be sturdier. The XR's crank and rods tended to suffer above 8,500 RPM, and Harley's own race boss, Dick O'Brien, disliked seeing them run at 9,000 RPM. Third, Honda focused on shaping the torque curve to suit dirt track. The RS had such broad pull that riders could roll away in 4th gear. On paper, the XR showed stronger torque, but because the Honda revved higher, the two ended up nearly equal at the rear wheel. In both cases, torque fell off at roughly 6 pound-feet per 1,000 RPM. Honda gave the RS a modern flat combustion chamber with forged, flat-top pistons using 3 rings, set up with tight clearances common in Japanese engines. The whole unit weighed in at about 151 pounds, which is about 8 pounds lighter than Harley's engine. Each cylinder was operated by its own overhead cam, driven by chains on opposite sides of the cases. Early versions did suffer from leaking external oil lines, but Honda solved this by casting them into the right side cover. And oil pressure ran at 80 psi on this thing. Now all of this looked great on paper, but specs don't always tell the whole story, especially in this kind of racing. How would the RS750 perform on the track head-to-head against the Harleys? Well, Honda's breakthrough came in 1984, the first year that the RS750 was campaigned for a full season. Ricky Graham, riding the Honda, delivered the ultimate proof that the new machine could beat Harley-Davidson's long dominant XR750. Graham carried the RS to the Grand National Championship, giving Honda its first title in dirt track and breaking Harley's grip on the crown. This win was more than symbolic. It showed that Honda's purpose-built V-twin had the strength and reliability and power delivery to succeed week after week against the best in the sport. In 1985, the spotlight shifted to Bubba Schobert after his rather dramatic failed 1984 season. Riding the RS750, Schobert backed up Honda's breakthrough by winning the Grand National Championship himself. Harley was officially on notice. This second title had proved that Graham's title the year before hadn't been a one-off mistake. The RS750 was clearly now the class bike of the field. Honda's dominance deepened in '86 when Schobert repeated as a champion. By now, the RS750's reputation was secure. Honda had successfully unseated Harley-Davidson as the central power in American flat track in just a few years. Schobert made it 3 in a row in '87. That season capped off a run of 4 consecutive Grand National titles for Honda, 1 with Graham in '84 and then 3 with Schobert in '85 through '87. Honda had taken over the sport in such a short period of time, one that Harley had dominated for over a decade, proving the effectiveness of the RS750 and changing the landscape of flat track racing. One of the key areas where classic Honda engineering had just proven better than Harley's was in reliability. Even Bubba Schobert admitted that there was nothing better than the way Harley's XR750 handled and put power to the ground, but the problem was worrying if it would finish the race. This wasn't the case with the RS750. Everything, all the mechanisms were just nicer. And of course, this would be one of the main areas in which regular road-going Hondas were better than Harleys and Triumphs. I mean, if you've ever worked on British or American bikes from this time period and then jumped over to a Honda, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's all just better engineered. After back-to-back championships, the AMA decided to step in and impose restrictor plates to essentially level the playing field, limiting the amount of air the engines could breathe. The idea was simple: slow down the Hondas and give Harley-Davidson a chance to catch up, though officially it was claimed to be related to excessive tire wear. I don't know if I buy that story. For For Honda, it was a frustrating move because they had played by all the rules and simply built a better machine. Still, the RS750 remained competitive even under restriction. The restrictors couldn't fully erase the advantages of Honda's engineering, but they highlighted just how disruptive this bike had been to flat track's balance of power. And then, just as quickly as they had arrived, Honda was gone. After the 1987 season, the factory program was shut down. The official reasons were never laid out in detail, but the picture was pretty clear. Honda had come, conquered, and then just walked away. Corporate priorities were shifting. Continuing dirt track was just less appealing. Dirt track had never had quite the same level of win on Sunday, sell on Monday like Grand Prix racing. Honda had proven what it wanted to prove, that Harley-Davidson's seemingly unshakable grip on American dirt track could be broken. With 4 consecutive championships, there was nothing left to demonstrate. It was a bit of a statement from Honda that there was no space that they couldn't dominate if they set their mind to it. Privateers continued to run the RS750, and the bikes remained competitive. Even without factory backing, this bike still had a fight left in it. The most dramatic reminder came years later in 1993 when Ricky Graham, riding a privateer Honda, pulled off one of the greatest comeback seasons in dirt track history. Against all odds, he captured the Grand National Championship on the very machine Honda had abandoned years later. His title was really proof of the RS750's lasting quality. Nearly a decade after its debut, the bike could still topple Harley-Davidson despite years of evolution and win the biggest prize in flat track. I think more than anything, the story of the RS750 and the Honda Dirt Track program showed Honda's corporate philosophy in action. When they committed to a project, they did it completely with overwhelming technical and organizational force. They had no background in American flat track, but within a few years, they redefined it. The RS750 cast a long shadow. Its success served as a reminder that Harley's dominance wasn't unbreakable, and decades later, I definitely think it influenced Indian's decision to go flat track racing. When Indian returned to the sport in the 2010s, they took a page from Honda's playbook. They built a purpose-designed machine, the FTR750, like the RS750 before it, and the Indian quickly became the new standard, showing how powerful this combination of focus, engineering, and resources can be. And like the Honda, they also dominated completely, even more so, only now to be leaving American flat track. Why, you wonder? Well, because of rule changes once again meant to level the playing field. Honda and also Indian have exposed the balance that flat track has always had to kind of manage. Tradition versus innovation. The XR750 represented decades of evolution, but the RS750 and the FTR750 were like sudden leaps. The truth is, AMA flat track needs to pick a lane. They have to figure out if they want to protect the old recipe or if they are actually open to inviting new ideas, which is hilarious to me. It's a pretty obvious decision. Why in the world would a race organization be so afraid of innovation? Whenever something fresh has started winning, the rulebook moves. Instead of setting clear limits and letting everyone, build to them, the series has this long history of case-by-case fixes that keep the status quo comfortable, aka keep Harley relevant. And I'm not saying MotoGP is perfect, but literally the Ducatis are absolutely dominant, and it meant that a company like Suzuki had to either decide, were they going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into the program, or were they going to leave? They chose to leave. Now companies like Yamaha are investing in it because they want to be competitive. If flat track wants to have any sort of future, it needs simple, stable rules. Set the rules, publish them, stick to them, and stop rewriting everything after someone else starts dominating. In my opinion, that invites more manufacturers in and gives privateers a fair shot and makes for a more enjoyable sport. And I think in that light, the RS750 was both a highlight but also a warning. It proved how good the racing can be when new ideas are allowed to run, and I think that personally flat track needs more of that. I would love to hear from you guys, especially those of you who've watched flat track and dirt track for a long time. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Ride safe.